And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This is Irreverent, Faith and Current Affairs.
Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum. Merry Christmas. You're back with Irreverent Faith and Current Affairs with me, Jamie, Father Christmas Franklin. I couldn't think of anything better to say. And my friend, Tom Pelham. Tom, I know we don't like to talk about the weather on the show, but it's flipping cold in Nottingham. I have to be honest. This Santa hat is the only thing that's keeping me sane with this madness. How is it down south?
It's cold as well. I mean, I must say it is cold. It's beautiful chill. When I trudged to church this morning, with wellies on, walked through the field. Yeah. It was good.
It sounds very atmospheric. Well, Tom, last week is going to be hard to beat because people absolutely loved that episode with Delingpole. Yeah.
I enjoyed having James here. I still don't agree with him, but I enjoyed having him on. He's good. He's a good egg, isn't he? Yeah.
Yes. I found it amusing when he said that you were brainwashed. I don't know how you found that.
Well, I didn't really want to comment because there's nothing really you can say about that, is there? It's literally impossible to come back again. It's not really falsifiable,
Well, if you were brainwashed, then you wouldn't be aware of it. So I suppose you're in a bit of a quandary because if you say, "Oh, I'm not brainwashed," then that's exactly the kind of thing a brainwashed person would actually say. But anyway, it's done really well. It's our most popular episode ever. Even more popular than the Rod Dreher one. So thanks, Rod. But we've found an even more popular guest than you. People did like it.
Yeah, I mean that's harsh on Rod, doesn't it? Because he's a nice.
Well, no, I mean this was a few weeks ago. We're growing all the time, and we've obviously got new. We get when you have a guest on, they bring some of their listeners and the people who follow them with them. So you gradually accumulate people, I think.
Okay, so it's just sort of
Delingpole is a big reason why lots of people are with us for sure.
Well, I know that the first sort of Delingpole rush was when you went on his Delling pod and talked, wasn't it? Yeah,
it was. Yeah.
Put us on the map.
Yes, it did. Not that I want to take any credit. It's about the quality of this show.
It's about the Holy Spirit, isn't it? It's God.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sort of arrogate to myself. I mean, maybe it's God. I hope it is. I really hope it is, Tom.
I don't see why it shouldn't be.
Well,
anyway.
I don't either. Well, let's have a vote. Write in if you think it's God, and if you don't think it's God, then
you think it's James Delingpole. Then is it God or James Delingpole?
Is the success of Irreverend due to God or Satan? A Twitter poll coming your way very, very soon.
I bet I can guess how many of our acquaintances at Cuddison would vote on that. Anyway,
I think it's going to be split. I think it's going to be split between clergy and laity will say different things about this as they
not
do.
Not all clergy.
No, some clergy like us. Some think that we should be. Certain things should happen to us, which I won't mention, but you can see on my Twitter feed if you're very interested.
Rummed out of the church. Anyway, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and worse. Anyway, but it's all banter, isn't it? It's all banter at the end of the day.
Is it though?
Well, it depends where does banter end and actual threat to life begin. I don't know.
Probably a little bit before those messages were sent to you, if I'm going to be honest. But yeah.
Before the death threats were made by the clergy. Oh, man. No, to be fair, the death threat came from a primary school teacher. So
Oh, that's all right then. That's okay. That's exactly the sort of person we want teaching in our school. Eminently suitable.
I'm prepared to accept it as a bit of rhetorical overstatement and hyperbole.
Okay, well, that's very, very generous of you.
Well, it's Christmas.
It is Christmas,
isn't it? It's Christmas.
Generous time of year.
I'm not going to make a big deal out of it because that's, I like a joke. Anyway, let's do some notices. Yeah. So thanks to everyone. Thanks so much to everyone who continues to support this podcast and new people as well who are still coming along very regularly, which is great. So if you'd like to support the podcast for as little as £1.50 a month, you can go to patreon.com/irreverent, and don't forget the VAT. Yeah, if you're in the UK, I think it's the other countries in the UK
and other places where
and you just check to see if you're going to have to pay VAT. But if you're here in England, certainly you need to pay 20% VAT, sadly, on anything that you give to us. But do support us if you'd like to. Follow us on Twitter, Reverend Pod. Our Telegram channel is absolutely banging. We are well over 1,000 people on there at the moment. Yeah, yeah. And it's a great place, like, for people to exchange information and connect with each other.
It is
t.me/Reverend Pod.
As is Patreon, of course.
As is Patreon, yes, Patreon is too. And there's a good thread on. I put up a thread for NHS workers who are facing the sack because of the vaccine mandate, and I think people have found that really, really helpful. So please do go on there and connect with other people, and we'll continue to try and facilitate things that will be helpful. A Reverend sermon audio. We try and get a sermon up every week. Sometimes we fail, like last week. Sorry,
of course, I can do one this week if you want, Jamie. I've got a great sermon.
I've got one as well. I tell you what, is yours for Christmas Day?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll do the midnight mass one, and then you can put one up for Christmas Day. How about that?
The midnight mass is Christmas Day, Jamie.
Well, there are 2 services though, aren't there? I mean, splitting hairs. Let's give it double whammy. We're going to have a double whammy this week. I'm
2 sermons.
Midnight mass, so there'll be one up on Friday.
I feel another Twitter poll coming on. No.
Which sermon is best?
Which one's better?
Right, there's going to be a double whammy. So irreverend sermon audio .buzzsprout.com to find those, and we're going to have to deliver that now, Tom. You've promised it.
Well, sorry, I've actually written one this week.
Oh, well done, writing a sermon. And what else do we have going on? Oh yeah,
the baby's not
Odyssey and stuff, and
Odyssey.
Subscribe, please subscribe to us on YouTube. Oh yeah, and also please do rate and review the podcast, because that helps other people to see it, and share it around. Share it with your friends. Send it to people, etc. I mean, if you like. Yeah,
if you don't like it.
As I always say, there is no compulsion in religion, says the Prophet Muhammad. So, just take that on board. Yeah, there's no obligation for any of this stuff. You don't have to do any of it. It's none of it. You don't even need to listen. You can just switch off right now. I hope people are aware of that. That this is not mandatory. There's no mandate here. We're not going to mandate irreverent. That would just be silly.
Actually, to be honest, it'd probably do the country some good, though, wouldn't it? I mean,
if we were going to mandate anything, then it would be this podcast. But I'm not to mandate.
I mean, maybe there's better things to mandate. I don't know.
No, I was once part of a Christian male fellowship group called Mandate.
Yeah.
It's really bad. I just made it up. I just made it. That's not true.
Oh man, it should be true. Maybe I'll set one up.
Mandate. That would like an instant safeguarding issue if you did that. Yeah. Right. Okay. Right. Now listen, people. Yeah, this is going to be a good episode. This isn't just a silly Christmas episode just because I'm wearing a Christmas hat. We're gonna finish the Bible thing we were doing last week when Dellingpole interrupted.
He did. He came in. We're in the middle of a very interesting discussion about hermeneutics. I thought it was interesting. I don't know. Did people think it was interesting? Let us know.
Yes. reverendpod@gmail.com. That's the other thing you can do is write an email to us, and we do appreciate people emailing in.
There's some news, isn't there? Because I'm now rector of Burwash.
Oh yeah, congratulations.
Burwash, Weald, and Etchingham.
Yeah, so I saw the photos.
Yeah, I made the bishop look quite small.
Yeah, well, that's not a comment on him though.
Even though he's, I'm actually taller than him, taller than his hat, despite the fact that it goes up about a foot above his head.
You could see over his mitre.
I could see over his mitre, or into. I don't know.
Our friend Dominic told me once that the significance of the mitre having 2 points is to do with the 2 natures of Christ.
I don't believe him. I don't believe him. No, I don't believe him. No, I don't think. I mean, there's no significance to the mitre. It's quite funny because the Church of England makes a lot of fuss about robing and clothing and has massive arguments about it. But the canon law is very clear that virtually none of it matters.
Yeah, and just so people know, it's like a mitre is like a 2-pronged hat that bishops wear.
I thought it was supposed to look like a flame, to be like the Holy Spirit.
Oh yeah, okay, I can see that.
They don't really wear it, Jamie. There's no one in the Church of England wore the mitre between 1540 and I think about 1920,
Was it that late?
It really was really late. There's an affectation they started again in the 20th century because they didn't feel important enough.
It's it's a papish affectation, isn't it? It's the Roman thing. Now listen, I'm not criticizing the Roman Church.
They can wear mitres.
We just got to be careful, Tom, because we can lapse into this as Protestants. Well, just to say, we love the Roman Catholic Church. We get lovely feedback from Roman Catholics, and we really appreciate Roman Catholics being part of our lovely irreverent
but
family.
I'm not. This isn't even an attack on Roman Catholics because they're
no, I was saying myself because I said the thing about a papish affectation.
Well, I know.
I take that back. That's just a joke. That's the kind of banter we used to have in theological college. But then we'd all go and repent afterwards for taking the mickey out of Roman Catholics, which we don't mean, by the way. It's just a joke. Sorry.
I think anyway. So the point is that the Roman Catholics are very happy for them to wear whatever they like. You know, they're just delighted to. But just because they wear it doesn't mean our bishops have to. I mean, it's a bit like. I mean, it feels a bit like they're sort of trying to pretend they're Roman Catholics by kind of, you know, if I wear the right stuff and then I get a little bit more Roman Catholic and maybe they'll let us back in again. But there's a sort of sense of that sometimes. But you know what? I don't. I'm sorry. But if I thought the Roman Catholic Church was right, then I'd be a Roman Catholic.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the way. I mean, let me throw an analogy out here, right? I think it's a little bit like the way vegetarians, like people who are vegetarian because they have an ideological or an ethical objection to eating meat, eating that corn stuff which looks like meat, and trying to make food which is as similar to meat as possible. Now, to me, that's like, well, come on here. I mean, you're supposed to be like showing us that meat is wrong, not like eating a meat substitute. That's just like you basically saying you want meat, but you can't. You know, you can't have it. It's like just become a carnivore.
You may as well.
Do you see what I mean?
I guess, Jamie, that there's a sort of those who have a sort of ethical issue about killing of animals. It's all right because they might still say meat is superior, but I don't want to eat it because I don't want to kill animals.
Yeah, but it resembles meat, doesn't it? In many ways, it kind of enables it. Anyway, maybe it's not a very good analogy.
Well, it's not a great one, but it's all right.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Should we go back to what's on the show?
What is on the show, Jamie?
Well, this is this thing because I don't want people to turn off when they're listening to this crap. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some serious stuff, right? So in a minute we're going to finish that Bible study on Revelation. It was not going to take that long, but I think we should. And then we're going to talk about recent comments that the Archbishop of Canterbury made that if you are not vaccinated, it appears that he said that people who are not being vaccinated are immoral.
We will listen to him, though. We're going to have a listen.
We'll listen. We want to be fair to what he said. And then we got another piece by Michael Nazarelli saying churches should stay open. And then I think after that, then we'll go. I mean, the thing is about the COVID thing, it's like, just the same stuff over and over again. But I think we should talk about it a bit. And I also think we should talk about this exchange between Fraser Nelson and the chairman of the SAGE Modelling Committee.
I definitely think so. The other thing is, of course, that it needs to be said over and over again, doesn't it? And there are some things that have changed. A couple of things. We're not in a lockdown right now, which I think.
I mean, there's very minor changes. It's like very minor variations. Yeah. It's like a Daft Punk song where they're just the same thing over and over again. And then
didn't your son used to really love Daft Punk, didn't he? Was that?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of songs that Daft Punk did with The Weeknd. Or The Weekend, or whatever his name is. To be honest with you, I sort of listened to them again, and I think the lyrics are quite filthy. So I stopped listening to them, but they are quite catchy. You know, The Weeknd, he did that song, "Blinding Lights." Do you remember that? It's quite a popular song. I just thought maybe you'd have heard of it. No. Anyway, that's a really good song. That's like a kind of 80s throwback. It sounds a little bit like Aha. If do you know Aha? There's no point in this. And then we're going to finish off with a Christmassy poem, which someone's written. Now, the comment about this is we'd like to sing it because it's like roughly 888, but unfortunately it doesn't scan very well. So it's going to be a little bit hit and miss. So if you're going to write poems to us, please do write poems. But if you'd like us to sing them, they have to be in a measure that's
metric. They've got to be metric,
consistent and singable. Okay?
You know, it's one of the most annoying things about modern hymns, and I don't mind what sort of worship people do, but modern songs is that so often the writers are lazy and they don't, rather than sort of making sure everything's metric and therefore easy to sing, and they just sort of add kind of quavers and upbeats and
and
all like, over the place, and it's just like, what's going on with this? Why can't you just learn to write poetry?
Exactly. And you know what else I really gets annoyed, gets on my nerves, is when they do those fake rhymes where there are two words which sort of sound a bit like each other but they don't rhyme. Like the classic one would be the words faith and grace, and they like put them in like a rhyming couplet, and they think that's a rhyme, and I'm sitting there thinking, hello, those words don't rhyme.
Faith and grace don't rhyme at all, Jamie. They're not even half rhyme.
Well,
they've got A in the middle of
them. If you sort of sing them in a kind of Midwestern American accent, they sound sort of like they do. Really? But I just find that really kind of like, annoys me that people think they can get away with this. I mean, what is the world coming to? Honestly,
awful things.
And I'm sorry, this is just more like public school banter. But as we said last week, Tom didn't even go to it. Tom went to a grammar school. All right, so get your facts straight. If you're gonna criticize us, get the facts straight. Okay.
Who's criticizing us for being public school? Did you get
somebody on YouTube?
Oodles of complaints about this. Do you know, if anyone wants to know a great hymn that scans beautifully, and it's crowned him with many crowns, which I had at my leaving. That's the tune, but the final verse is some of the greatest poetry I think in the country. Crown him the Lord of years, the potentate of time, creator of the rolling spheres, ineffably sublime. I mean, that's a great couplet, isn't it?
It's a very nice. I think the word is potentate, though.
Potent? Is it potent? What did I say?
You said potentate.
No, I said potentate.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you said potentate.
No, that's like a pope.
Something to do with the pope. I was going to say. Right. Okay. Anyway, let's do a prayer. We missed all prayers last week. Which
we didn't.
Really
we did pray before we started.
Yeah, but nobody cares about that because they can't hear.
Well, they should know we do it though.
We intercede for the world for roughly 45 minutes, an hour before every episode. So just know that. All right,
Jamie, you shouldn't tell lies.
That's a lie, just so everyone knows. All right, let's do the Lord's Prayer, shall we?
Yeah.
Right. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Okay, right. So do you want to just read this passage, Tom?
I did. Let me just find the. Let's just.
You don't even have it up. That's unbelievable.
I do have it up. I have it up in the New International Version.
No.
Exactly.
No.
Here we go. All right, ready? You ready?
Which version are you using?
You'll know.
Is it KJV?
Yeah, of course it is.
Okay, good. Go on then.
Unto the angel of the church of Ephesus write, these things saith he that holdeth the 7 stars in his right hand, who walketh in the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks. I know thy works, and thy labour, and thy patience, and how thou canst not bear them which are evil, and thou hast tried them which say they are apostles and are not, and hast found them liars, and hast borne and hast patience, and for my name's sake hast laboured and hast not fainted. Nevertheless, I have somewhat against thee, because thou hast left thy first love. Remember, therefore, from whence thou art fallen, and repent, and do the first works, or else I will come unto thee quickly, and will remove thy candlestick out of his place, except thou repent. But this thou hast, that thou hatest the deeds of the Nicolaitanes, which I also hate. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God.
Very good. We should probably, I don't know whether we said what it is. It's Revelation chapter 2, verses 1-7. And I only sniggered slightly because of your pronunciation of that word, Tom, because we had a long conversation about it last week, didn't we?
I thought I did it all right this time. I mean, I had a bit of a,
I think the word, it's even like passed out in my RSV, Nicolaitans. but I don't. It doesn't sound
honestly
quite right.
Who's going to say that on a podcast? Nicolaitans.
Nicolaitans. It just sounds weird, doesn't it? It's like got a glottal stop in between the A and the I. Anyway, who cares? It doesn't matter. We talked about that last week. It's like a heretical group. It seems like it was a heretical group that was into like antinomianism, which is like lawless behavior. But I think when we got to the point where we're talking about how the church has tested those who called themselves apostles but are not, and found them to be false. So we were saying that there is actually a duty of discernment in the church, and sort of asking where that is today.
Far too often people sort of take the words of Matthew 7, judge not lest ye be judged, and just apply them randomly to life. They say, Christians, you shouldn't be judging people because it says don't judge. Yeah. And which is actually a complete misreading of that passage. It doesn't, of course, say don't judge. It says, effectively, if you judge, then be prepared to be judged by the same yardstick.
Yeah.
The measure by which you measure, you will be measured by, as the Greek says. It's not often translated quite that weirdly. So we are expected to have discernment about our apostles, about our leaders, about all those who are in the church. Because not everyone is necessarily walking the same path as us, even if they might look like they are. That's not to say, that we persecute them or anything like that, but you just have to, be discerning.
Yeah, I mean, on the issue of judgment, I think there's a very clear sort of emphasis in teaching of Christ, for example, that you're to sort of sort yourself out first before you go around judging other people. But that doesn't mean that there's never an appropriate place for judgment. Remove the log from your own eye before you look at the speck in your brother's, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and obviously, we should be aware of our own faults, our own biases, our own problems, as well.
Yeah, I mean,
but it doesn't take away the duty to make sure that we are discerning about what other people are saying and doing.
Yes, and that comes back to the thing about the Nicolaitans, doesn't it? Because it says later on that Christ, who is the writer of this letter, commends them for hating the works of the Nicolaitans, which he also hates. So they're commended for having spiritual discernment. And this is an absolutely key issue, I think, which in my view, the church is lacking these days, is that there is very, very little spiritual discernment. And there is no real sort of discernment of a false teaching, of heresy, of unbiblical teaching, and so on and so forth. Sorry, carry on, Tom.
Well, and it sort of that lack of discernment applies right across. I mean, in theological college, there were literally lecturers who were allowed to teach heretical teachings. They were allowed to stand up and teach them in front of prospective vicars, and you're thinking, who on earth is doing that? Who on earth is letting that happen? And at the very least, why aren't they questioned about this? To sort of what are you doing at a Christian seminary?
I think in the Church of England we've got into this bizarre position, haven't we, where we've got this kind of relativism that exists in the church, where you have sort of different groups within the church, and they each have completely different approaches to Christian faith. So you have sort of people who would put more emphasis on the formularies of the Anglican Church, like the Book of Common Prayer and the 39 Articles, as witnesses to the truth of the Scriptures. Like that would be you and me, in with different emphases, but nevertheless that way. And then you have sort of evangelicals who would say, it's more about sort of Bible only, although there are different shades of evangelicalism.
I'd say that, traditional evangelicalism at least is quite happy with the Book of Common Prayer. But anyway, it's very hard. It's very hard not to be.
I guess what I mean is like a sort of the dominant evangelical group in the Church of England is the charismatic evangelicals. And
that's as much of this is sort of direct revelation, isn't there? In the sense of that they sort of lay claim to, and it's a bit of a problem, really. Sort of the idea that the Spirit can guide them to the truth of the Bible without any of that sort of traditionalism nonsense.
Without the need for the witness of the church and the guidance of the guidance and wisdom of the church throughout the ages,
and sort of, it can lead to some problems. It has led to problems. You get.
Sorry. I think the main issue though is with, and I want to be careful how I say this, but with a kind of the sort of so-called liberal tradition in the church, which relies more on reason and experience and in many cases sees fit to actually reject Scripture and to reject the orthodox teachings of the church and to create something which is novel. And I think that's a problem, not least. I mean, I'm not a liberal in that sense myself, and so I don't hold those positions, but to me it's a problem because it's an antithetical position to the kind of position that you and I would have, it just seems like a completely different religion.
Well, I mean, it's effectively, I mean, you might make comparisons with the sort of antinomianism, the sort of the lawlessness of the Nicolaitans, because it quite often comes to similar positions. And it's weird though, because you can get there's also, I mean, the thing about the Book of Common Prayer and the sort of trying to hold to a sort of central tradition in the Church of England is that you are guarded against the excesses of the liberalism and the excesses of the charismatics, both of which, well, if anything, evangelicalism has a tendency to be overly law focused, which ends up with a problem with grace, and then and the liberals end up being overly not having enough of a focus on the law, and you have again a problem with what grace is doing.
Yeah, so I think you and I would probably agree, just to annoy as many people as we possibly can, that the problem is that we should all just use the Book of Common Prayer, and assent to its teaching.
That would sort it out, wouldn't it? I mean,
yeah, and then that would sort the whole thing out. But anyway, I think we're getting a bit too far from the text here. That's open to debate and discussion. Obviously, it's just our opinion.
Have they got to, Jamie?
What? Yeah. Sorry, it's just like just my opinion. Okay,
just your opinion. Right, just what Jamie's saying.
Just what I think. Okay?
Don't send in death threats or anything.
If you're offended, I'm very sorry. So anyway, they're commended for enduring patiently and bearing up for his namesake and not growing weary. So endurance is an important thing. But he has this against them, that they have abandoned the love they had at first. Now, then it sort of goes on to say, remember then from what you have fallen, repent and do the works that you did at first. So the love there is actually, it doesn't appear to be like an emotional feeling, but there are some good things, some good works that the church was doing originally, which it's not doing anymore. So it's quite enduring, but it's not doing those good works.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you kind of wonder. I mean, obviously, works are not what sort of gives us salvation. That's you can't work your way to goodness. So I wonder whether there's a sort of whether it's that first love isn't necessarily something they were doing, but a sort of a belief that they held, or maybe they've forgotten what the core of their calling was, which is maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. The thing is here it's connected to this thing where he says, if you don't do those works, I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place unless you repent. So, which sounds like that, the lampstand refers to the kind of opportunity that the church has to bear the light, right? So if the lampstand is removed, it sounds like, the end of the church or the diminishment of the church in some significant way. So just one sec. So what it's saying is there's something actually quite central, quite fundamental about what it means to be a church that you are not doing, and you need to recover that, and you need to do that again. And it's not really clear what it is. We're not really told any more information, but it's not hard to. It's not hard to think of what the kind of thing it might be, like the orthodox preaching and teaching of the gospel, making disciples, discipling people in truth, leading people away from sin, that kind of thing.
And there's maybe something even more central, because it's very possible to be discerning, but then to forget to be loving, or at least to forget the whole point of it is just to focus on Christ.
Yes.
And if you were to say what is the first love of the church, what is the first work, it is worship of God.
Yes.
So there's maybe a sense in which they've let their sort of search for purity get in the way of their search for Christ. And I don't know, but that's a supposition. It's not really there in the text enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you were to bring a kind of hermeneutical application, as we were talking about last week. I think this is we've actually seen not to do too much of a kind of obvious segue, but we've actually seen lots of good examples of this kind of thing recently. I would say the centrality of the gospel, of the message of Jesus Christ, I would say has been obscured behind statements, proclamations about things which are absolutely not central to the gospel and not central to the Church of Jesus Christ at all. And so the church may endure, it may continue and bear up, but if the gospel is not central, if the proclamation of Jesus Christ as Lord is not central, then the church is in danger of losing its lampstand. And as you say, Tom, we don't know what's going on with this church, but we do know what's going on with our own church. And I would say, I think that the Archbishop of Canterbury's comments in the Daily Mail are a good example of this. What do you think about that?
Well, we sort of complained before about, whether our church is currently glorifying God, or whether it's simply repeating government messages, and whether it's doing so outside of its own sort of area of expertise, in a sense. I mean, it's quite hard because we do have a sort of holistic view, I guess, of life, but to sort of to declare as evil those who are or not evil. Well, we'll have to listen to it. Really,
we should listen to it
because
exactly what he said.
Immoral, I think he says. But we'll see. Of those who are not taking the vaccine because they're selfish and not loving their neighbour, comes across to me as being rather manipulative, and it's a sort of manipulativeness that it doesn't take much imagination to think of it in places which would be really very inappropriate, and it doesn't. And one then has to ask, whether this is an appropriate way to be using the gospel, to be using the word of Christ, and the answer has to be no. Because it's not, Christ, of course, isn't talking about vaccinations, and whether Christ would have a vaccination or not is entirely beside the point. I mean, we need to listen to it, I think, Jamie.
Yeah, but I mean, just to finish off the Bible study here. So in verse 7, I think we get a glimpse, don't we, of what Christ is calling the church to when he says, "To him who conquers, I will grant to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God." And this really speaks to the message of the gospel, which is that God offers us eternal life through Jesus Christ. And this is what we should be telling people about. And the question is, it's not wrong to make ethical pronouncements, if it's done in the right way every once in a while. But I think the question we have to ask ourselves is the church actually proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ publicly, or is it hitching its bandwagon to whatever fashionable moral imperative is prevalent in society at this particular time? And I think that's the frustration that people feel, is that whenever something comes along like COP26 or the vaccine or Black Lives Matter or whatever it might be, these bishops pop up and just completely uncritically endorse it. I mean, we had the Archbishop a few weeks ago saying that COP26 was literally the most important thing that these politicians would ever be involved in their whole careers, and that if they didn't get it right, they would be cursed, and if they did get it right, a generation would rise up and bless them. Now, we haven't heard anything about COP26. People forgot it was going on about halfway through the conference. So it's just, people see this and they think, where is the gospel? Where's the gospel in this message? Where is the message of Jesus Christ? Anyway, should we listen to this thing?
Let's listen. Let's have a listen.
All right, let's watch the full video here and let's see if we can hear this. Right. Oh, look, there's an advert. Can you believe that there's an advert? It's just unbelievable, isn't it? This is a top quality podcast, and there's an advert. Here we go.
About me and my rights. Now, obviously, there are some people who, for health reasons, can't get vaccinated. Different question. But it's not about me and my rights to choose. It's about how I love my neighbor. To love one another, as Jesus said, get vaccinated, get boosted. I practice sin well, but I'm not very good at judging it. Sin or not, I would say, let's be positive. Go and do it. All of us know people who have very strong views about not getting vaccinated. And I'm really puzzled by it. I don't understand it, because it seems to me that I'm not a scientist. I do know some of the scientists who are doing this. They're not evil people. This is not a conspiracy. Goodness knows. I mean, I've had enough trouble organizing a conspiracy in the Church of England. We don't even succeed then, let alone a national conspiracy on vaccination. It's not a conspiracy. It's not a plot. They are not bad people. They are,
hang on, there's 10 seconds left,
giving us their best advice. What I think about them is trust them. They know what they're doing better than we do. They may be wrong, but they know what they're doing better than we do.
Okay.
Well, I mean, blimey. It's actually worse than I thought it was going to be.
Oh no, sorry, it's another. Oh, sorry.
More adverts. Okay, let's. I mean, there's some odd things going on there. I mean, one wonders whether he's bothered to try.
You probably know us for a meeting.
Sorry, hang on. This is total.
Get your house in order.
Right. Can you still hear me?
I can. Yeah.
All right. Sorry, it's done now. I've closed the page. Yeah.
Sorted.
Carry on.
Okay.
Sorry. This is so.
I mean, what is this?
Amateurish. Sorry.
Amateur hour over in Nottingham.
Total balls up here. Right. Go on. Carry on.
Okay. Here we are. I was in the middle of saying.
Yeah. Go on.
There are a number of things which I think we need to.
Embarrassing.
Well, no, it's embarrassing for Justin Welby. I was going to say. The first one is that he's clearly not bothered to try and understand anyone who has expressed anything, sort of even anti-vax. He sort of labels everyone. He doesn't try and understand why people might be upset with the various different things like coercion, like the potential risk balance at different ages. The obvious problems with the use of modern medical technology and the tainting with aborted fetal tissue. He doesn't bother with any of those. He just says, "Oh well, these people, I don't really understand them, but listen to the scientists. They're And there's a wonderful bit at the end where he says, "Well, they might not be right, but we listen to them anyway because they obviously know more." And you're thinking, honestly, I don't really quite know who he's preaching to be honest, because he's unlikely to call anyone to church through this, because either you're going to be vaccinated, in which case it's not to you, but the unvaccinated aren't going to suddenly go, "Oh, Justin Welby, he tells me they're all right and he's a good egg, let's go and get vaccinated." I don't understand. But what it is going to do is push people away, because there are people with genuine reasons to not take the vaccinations, whether that and fundamentally it's their body.
So I mean, do you think it'd be useful to talk about why people might? I mean, so he says he's confused. So I mean, one of the points you make, Tom, and this is absolutely right, and we said it a bit about this last week, is like, if you don't understand why people hold a position, then shouldn't you be trying to procure that information in some way rather than just sort of talking past them? I mean, that would be the first thing. It's like, you could at least try and understand. And so what he does is he does this thing which is very common, where he says you should trust the experts, and this isn't a conspiracy. So the conspiracy thing is just a way of dismissing people's concerns, right? Well, the majority of people don't think that. I don't know about this, but I would say there's a vast swathe of people who don't believe in any kind of conspiracy whatsoever, and who have other reasons for not getting vaccinated. And also, that word conspiracy is a kind of way of dismissing any concerns about the political aspect of this, and saying that if you've got any kind of problem with the way that this is being handled, or any questions about what's going on behind the scenes, then you are a conspiracy theorist. And therefore it's basically like akin to having some kind of mental illness. So the point I'm making is that the strongest presentation of the argument is not he clearly doesn't understand what it is. So I'm just saying, like, what would you say to that, Tom?
Well, I would say, I'm tempted to write to him. Look, I'd give him three reasons really why I don't think that everyone who's against the vaccine is a conspiracy theorist. I think it's perfectly possible to, the three reasons being, would be the first one, that there are obvious conscience issues around aborted material that he's never addressed, never even bothered to address, and doesn't seem to care why people might care about it. But it's, as we've said, there's I mean, it's not a first order issue. There are there are arguments, and I think the Roman.
What do you mean it's not? What do you mean by it's not?
Well, I think you can be a Christian and come to a different conclusion on this, is what I mean. But I think that you can certainly have a valid conscience reason not to take the vaccine for that reason alone. The Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith did a long reflection on this, and they essentially said that there's an evil at the heart of this sort of medical technology that Christians, if they feel conscience bound to object to, have every right to. But they did say that if you are sufficiently at risk from then that balance might change. So there's a sense in which the strong, if we're going to use sort of Pauline language, might be those who are able to protect the weak, in this case the children being killed for medical science, by objecting to it and being quite entitled to do so.
I think that's a terrible argument, if I'm honest with you, Tom. I think it's a utilitarian argument that mitigates against the teaching of the teaching of the Apostle Paul, for example. Should we sin? Should we do evil that grace may abound?
I don't know. I don't know whether it's I probably didn't quite put the argument across properly.
Yeah, we don't want to misrepresent the argument. But that is the kind of argument that people make. They say, well, even though these vaccines were developed using aborted fetal tissue, they're doing so much good that it justifies the initial immorality of
that's not what the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith are saying. I think they're saying that if you're in danger from this disease, then you might have a different point of conscience to those who are not in danger. I don't know. I
don't see whether or not you're at risk as having any bearing on the ethical issue. If it's an ethical issue, it's an ethical issue. It's not okay to do something because it benefits you more if the initial action would be immoral.
I guess because their argument might be that because we're at a second degree sort of immorality, so to speak, it's been done, and so then a utilitarian argument does come in. But then, the reason I would say that there's a good argument to stand up against it is that it keeps on happening, and at some point we need to witness to the medical world that it's not okay to use aborted tissue in the development of drugs, because
Tom, your microphone's gone a bit sort of crackly.
Sorry, is that any better?
Yeah, much better. Yeah.
Sorry. The second thing I would then say, so moving on, is that there is it's sort of generally being considered uncontroversial to say that coercing people into taking medicines is wrong, and that coercion, whether it is spiritual, which I'll call this sort of a spiritual, quite coercive use of the Bible, don't take the medicine because what Jesus would do it's not really on. It's not how you bring people alongside you, and it's not what Christ did generally. He was much more likely to say, go and make your own mind up. In some senses, what do you need to do? Said the rich young man said to him, what do I need to do? And Jesus said, well, what are the laws? And follow them. And then it didn't sort of coerce the young man into doing anything. And when the young man went, it was with because he couldn't give up his wealth, it was with sadness that you get a sense of, rather than anything else. Jesus didn't say, didn't make anything coercive, I would say. But anyway, moving away from that, sort of the general idea that you don't have the body autonomy is what it comes down to. You must do something for the government, or it's quite all right to, or you're doing something wrong. It's not okay. Got Jamie?
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I would approach an answer is to say that, since the Archbishop uses Scripture, I think it's relevant to talk about how we apply Scripture in our lives today, right? So, one method of exegesis and hermeneutics, which, you know, about, like we've been talking about interpreting scripture and applying it, were to say that there are like two stories or two towns, let's say, and they're kind of connected by a bridge. And the one town is the town that scripture is written in, and then the other town is our town. And you've got to find a way of getting from one to the other, right? So in order to do that, you need to understand, at least to some extent, both. And I think the question, and then the bridge is the method of interpretation, right? So that's what it represents in that image. So you've got their town, what's going on in their town, what's being said, the bridge, which is the interpretation, and then our town. How then do you apply that message in our situation, in our story? And I think that just blandly quoting this, you know, love your neighbor as yourself, as though it's obvious how that applies in our situation, is extremely superficial. For a start, if you take the biblical reference, which I think it's said many times in scripture, but Christ's teaching, when he answers the question, you know, what's the most important commandment, he says, there are two, which are, you shall love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now that's it's in Luke 10:27, but I'm pretty sure elsewhere, I'm just looking for it here, he says that the second commandment is like it. It's in Matthew 22:39. So you've got two commandments: love God. The second commandment is love your neighbor as yourself, and the second commandment is like the first one. So there's a link, as far as Christ is concerned, between loving God and loving your neighbor. So the point I'm drawing here is that in order to love your neighbor, you have to have some understanding of the relationship of God to your neighbor. And I would argue that the primary way that you love your neighbor is by showing something of God to your neighbor, you know, as a follower of Christ. So the question is, you know, how do you then apply that in the world that we're living in today? And I think for me, I just see a completely different story to the Archbishop of Canterbury. He believes that this story is absolutely true, clearly, that there's a deadly pandemic. You know, I try and summarize it as fairly as I can. But there's a deadly pandemic, and the only way that we can protect ourselves and other people is by taking a vaccine, and presumably kind of taking it in perpetuity, that the vaccine is safe, that the vaccine is necessary, that the vaccine is effective, the vaccine is ethical, and that in order to do this, you know, this is the loving thing to do if you do this for all these reasons. Now, I just see that story complete. So what's going on in our town, if you like, I just see that as completely different. I think that the threat is being overplayed. I don't believe that vaccines are the only way of treating COVID-19. I think there are other effective treatments which for some reason are being suppressed, like ivermectin. I don't believe that the vaccines are safe, and even objectively speaking, the vaccines are still under emergency use authorization. So one question I would ask the Archbishop is, who is he applying that? So when he says, oh, there are health, you know, as far as he's concerned, there are health exemptions. Well, who has those health exemptions? So do pregnant women have the health exemptions because they're being advised to get the vaccine? They're being strongly advised to. Do children? You know, what exactly is being said here? And if he's not clear about that, then he should be, because this is very serious advice that you're giving to people. You know, you give a child a vaccine and the child gets myocarditis or the child dies, you've given that child the advice, and the child didn't need that vaccine personally, because we know children aren't at risk from COVID. So there's a question of the safety there. And I agree with you, Tom, about the ethical issue. I think Christians should take this way more seriously than they do, that these vaccines have been developed using aborted fetal tissue, and this is an ongoing practice. So you can't just ignore these things.
It's not just enough to say, oh well, there's a fetus from the 60s that they're using. There have been fetuses this year, you know, used in medical research. It all needs to end. Cooperating with any bit of it has to be. You have to think about it at the very least. You have to think about it. And it's not enough not to. It's not enough not to.
I think as well, sorry, Tom, just to finish on my thing, I think there's a serious question about whether these vaccines are even effective as well. I mean, there's so many people who have COVID who have had 2 or 3 vaccinations. The statistics are very clear that there's a pretty even spread in terms of people who are unwell. So what is this vaccine even doing in terms of its effective thing?
It does look likely that it does defend against the most serious forms of it. It does, but it's certainly not likely. But that's self-protection. That's not this sort of help thy neighbor thing that the Archbishop was talking about. At the moment, it looks like you are more likely to catch the virus if you are vaccinated than if you are not vaccinated after a certain point. Now, there might be a lot of reasons for this. One reason might be that the unvaccinated people have had the virus in one way or another, and so therefore their natural immunity is better than the vaccine procured immunity that other people are relying on. It might be that it looks like after being quite steady for a couple of months, there's actually a sort of negative relationship between being vaccinated and being vulnerable to catching the virus. So, I mean, if anything, that doesn't really make any sense, does it? It completely blows the love thy neighbor bit out of the water, from the Archbishop there, because you're not actually doing very much to stop yourself from catching or passing on COVID. The other thing is, I mean, just today, the latest ONS study looking at daily skeptics, triple vaccinated, more than 4 times more likely to test positive Omicron than unvaccinated. The raw data shows 4 times, more than 4 times more likely. So it doesn't say anything. I mean, to be precise, this doesn't say anything about the catching the virus. It simply says that if you are someone with the virus, if you are vaccinated, you are more likely to have
Omicron.
Then you are if you're unvaccinated.
Yeah.
But you're more likely to have Delta.
Yeah, I feel like it's important for me to qualify something I said earlier when I said when I said I don't believe it's safe. What I mean is, I don't believe it's safe, but what I mean is I certainly don't believe it's safe enough for people to be standing up and basically saying as a blanket statement, it's safe for anyone to have this. Now, I would advocate. I just want to say 2 things quickly. I don't understand why nobody took something like the Great Barrington Declaration seriously, which to me makes perfect sense, which is that if with people who are very vulnerable to COVID, which is a very small minority of people, of course, if they want to have the vaccine, fine, they can have the vaccine, right? And if necessary, they can stay at home and guard themselves if they want to, right? But everyone else should be allowed to catch COVID because it's just like a kind of flu. It could be like a reasonably bad flu, but it's probably not going to kill you and me. So obviously, if people are sick, stay at home. If you've got symptoms, stay at home. But everyone else should be allowed to go about their ordinary business and for their immune system to develop immunity. Then we get a kind of general immunity, and then we'd be able to move on with our lives. The thing I object to is this ideology that everybody needs to be vaccinated regardless of who they are. And sorry, just one other thing, Tom, and this relates to this thing I was saying about this story, because for me this is like a religious story now. We are being told a religious narrative which is about there's an ultimate enemy, which is COVID, there's a savior, which is the vaccine, and there are religious practices which we have to participate in. And that's what this is really about. This is about participation in this narrative. This is why they want us to sanitize our hands all the time. This is why they want us to wear masks. This is why they want us to have the vaccine, because they want to know that we are acolytes, that we are adherents to this religion. And when you don't do that, then you are an anti-vaxxer or a conspiracy theorist. And then you become part of the out-group. You become part of the scapegoat party, which is what's happening with the anti-vaxxers at the moment. And I think this is, I think it's an alternative religion, so it's antithetical to Christianity. And I think it's really, really dangerous. I think it's really bad. I think we're in the midst of a kind of a sort of mass religious psychosis. And I'm worried about where it could lead. So I don't think the answer is that we just all submit and just get vaccinated over and over again for the rest of our lives against COVID.
Yeah. No, and I'm just reading so I can be fair to the Vatican, what they're congreging for the doctrine of faith. Is that what it's called? Pontifica Academia Pro Vita, for life. And basically their conclusions to this. So I'll just read them out because I think I was sort of there, but not quite. So they say, this is prior to COVID, this was written, it must be said, but I mean, I can't see that the ethical arguments have changed. It says, to summarize the document, it must be confirmed that there is a grave responsibility to use alternative vaccines to make a conscientious objection with regard to those which have moral problems. As regard the vaccines, without an alternative, the need to contest so that others may be prepared must be reaffirmed, as should be the lawfulness of using the former in the meantime, insomuch as it is necessary to avoid a serious risk for one's not only for one's own children or life, but perhaps more specifically for others. So they're talking about the rubella vaccine there. Right. Now, they then go on to sort of qualify that a bit as a passive material cooperation and in its mildest and remotest form, and only in extrema until such a so your obligation, if you do go on to take this, they're saying, is that you make everyone aware that this is immoral and campaign against it. Now,
well, even though you're taking it,
yes, they're saying you can take it, they can take it, it would be fine, but if you take it, it is in the context of moral coercion of conscience, and it is unjust, and you should be prepared to tell people that it's unjust to take the aborted and tainted vaccines. Now, the thing about COVID in particular is that it's a different level of kettle of fish, really, because COVID, unlike rubella or various other sort of childhood vaccines, and sorry, James, I'm not quite sure I agree with you yet, but
your microphone is going all fuzzy again, Tom.
Oh dear.
It's stopped now. It's stopped now. It's cleared up. It keeps on doing it. I don't know whether it's a problem with the wire or not. Anyway, sorry. Carry on.
So let me just, maybe that's what it is. So in so much as COVID is not a risk to anyone under the age of 60 who is healthy, for example, particularly, I think it's still only about 3,000 deaths in that, less than that in that category. In so much as, which is fewer than flu most years, in so much as the vaccine itself is dangerous to anyone, more dangerous than COVID to anyone probably under the age of 30, in so much as all those who wish to take the vaccine probably have or have caught it. There is no, I would say, even in the case of COVID, there's very little justification on the grounds of serious risk of health for the taking of the vaccine. So the fact that the Archbishop of Canterbury is not just passively cooperating in what is an evil, but actively encouraging the taking of an evil is a really worrying thing. Really worrying thing. And
there certainly hasn't been any public reflection from him, or even acknowledgement that this is an issue, has there?
We'll pop this document for people to read and comment on, really, because it's an interesting one. I'll just send it to Jamie. There it is. The other thing that was really quite interesting is his weird and lame joke about conspiracy theories in the Church of England, which I hope is a joke.
But I mean, funny.
It was, well, I mean, but if you think about
he said, what was he saying? That he tried to organise a conspiracy in the Church of England. Hasn't managed.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what his conspiracy is. A conspiracy of, I don't know.
I think it's a collective. It's a collective noun for. It's like a conspiracy of bishops, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I thought it was a parliament. I don't know.
Yeah, it might be a flock.
It's an owls, a parliament of bishops.
A flock of bishops. God, sorry, Karen. I'm just doing. You were going to make a serious point.
I was.
It was about conspiracies.
Well, it was just that, what is it? It's not a laughing matter, is it? Like if there is actually conspiracies in the Church,
we do have quite a lot of banter on this show, though, Tom. So we're all about the lols.
All about the lols. I don't know. No. This is weird. I'm just thinking. I just can't quite process.
I mean, to be honest with you,
it wouldn't. What did he said? What he tried to say was, I wouldn't. Do you really think there would be a conspiracy theory? I can't even set up a conspiracy in the Church of England, and it's just a bit tasteless. I don't know.
Well, it made me think there probably is a conspiracy because the way he said it was so shifty and suspicious.
Yeah, it's a really odd thing to say.
It was like something from Austin Powers, wasn't it? Of course there isn't a conspiracy. Ha ha ha. Oh, who could think that there was a conspiracy? There's no well, it's just such an outlandish notion.
And me, I wouldn't be in a conspiracy. I can't even set conspiracies up. See, it's just weird.
I can't even spell conspiracy. So that made me actually more suspicious that there is a conspiracy.
I'm just trying to wonder what the conspiracy is. What's it?
The conspiracy
in the Church of England?
I don't know what the conspiracy. I think we've covered whatever that might be on. I think quite extensively, haven't we? But so anyway, I think we've covered that quite well. I think the thing is that the really serious. I mean, I think there are loads of really serious ethical issues here, but I think one of them is this encouragement on the part of this participation by the Archbishop of Canterbury in this narrative where people who are vaccinated are good people and people who are unvaccinated are by implication bad people. And this is unbelievably a sort of simplistic and shallow approach to life in general. But I also think it's really worrying in terms of the way that people are being encouraged and coerced and nudged into thinking by the government and by the corporate media, who are trying to make out that unvaccinated people are somehow to blame for this situation, which is just manifestly absurd. And I am quite concerned about where it might be leading. But should we have something positive, Tom?
Yeah, can we have a swift break first?
Yeah, of course. All right, back in a moment. Okay, so break over. Michael Nazir-Ali became a Roman. There's written a good article in the Telegraph. Churches should not be closing their door at Christmas time. Christmas is the one time of the year when large numbers do want to go to church. Blah, blah, blah. Throughout Advent, I've noticed people coming back to church, sometimes after long periods of self-isolation. Many are tired and depressed and longing for some cheer and hope. This is the church's big opportunity to get across their message that there is good news about our ultimate worth in God's eyes, and that the world is under his providential care, not new scares about coronavirus and climate change notwithstanding. It is a time to minister to people's anxiety and brokenness, to help them meet one another and to gather for prayer, praise and celebration. Amen, brother.
Amen. Well, this is in the context of HTB, of course, have shut down all their Christmas services, haven't they? I believe. The rumor is, anyway, I've not seen a confirmation.
I don't know if it's all. I know the central one has. I didn't know. Yeah. Is it like? Do they do it all together? I don't really know.
I don't think they're sort of corporate in that way, but the central HTB Holy Trinity.
Are they all on a Telegram group with Nicky Gumbel, and he just like sends a message? He sends a message out, and or he probably does it in another way, like by a carrier pigeon or something. Anyway, the arrival of the Omicron variant, however, I love Nicky Gumbel, by the way, and the Alpha Course and HTB. It's all really good. I like the Alpha Course. I've done it many times.
I don't really.
Okay, well, let's look, Tom. Come on, I'm trying to keep it like this is ecumenical.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
We hate it, all of it. Anyway, the arrival of the arrival of the Omicron variant has put this time of preparation and celebration in jeopardy. There seems little doubt that the variant spreads quickly and that there is need for care and caution. At the same time, however, the data from South Africa show that the illness caused by the variant is mostly mild. It is true that there are differences of demography, good word, between South Africa and the UK. The situation may change if new evidence emerges. But an accelerated program of booster vaccinations does appear to be providing increased protection to the population at large, not according to the thing you just read out, Tom. Anyway, carrying on. Even before the latest speculation about new restrictions, it seemed that the pessimistic projections and worst case scenarios had induced a spirit of fear in people. Churches and all other organizers of events have been going beyond the guidelines and cancelling concerts and services. Even outdoor things have been cancelled, and cathedrals are limiting numbers, etc. We have now got used to the captivity of lockdown and to the removal of basic liberties for family and friends to meet, for people to gather, for entertainment or education, or indeed for worship. The more often they're taken away, the more we will get used to not having them. Once the principle is established that liberties can be curtailed for what the government of the day deems to be sufficient cause, they could be restricted for other reasons. Churches and cathedrals are, by their very nature, places for meeting, for learning, for music and worship. Such places are necessary to give us a sense of belonging and of cohesion as communities, and for the transmission of common values. My plea to them at this time is to give heed to their mission, to balance risk with opportunity, and not to be overtaken by the prevalent spirit of fear. While every precaution should be taken, Let us not go beyond what is required. Let us not close our doors to the lonely, the needy, and the anxious, but go out to serve them with confidence in our calling. The gathering, singing, and celebration all lead to and are for the sake of, as John Metchman saw, the core of our message, that God was a man in Palestine and lives today in bread and wine. Let us proclaim this message boldly to all who need to and want to hear it this Christmas tide.
You know, it's a bit of a hot and cold article, but on the whole, a good one. I think it's
miles better than anything we've heard from
Bishop Welby,
almost anyone in the Church of England, I would say.
Yeah, I just don't like this necessarily. This you know, while precautions must be taken, sort of. Yes, I mean, it depends what you mean by that. And some people say, yes, of course, precautions, shut the church down. You know, why are we meeting at all?
I mean, I think to read him in a kind of generous way, I think he's saying that precaution should be relative to the threat posed by the virus, which he's saying is not very much at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah. Okay. I guess. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've said it. I mean, Jonathan Sumption said it 2 years ago, nearly. We've said it many times, but I think he's right that the more that we get used to the idea that our liberty is just, you know, another thing that the government can take and give, the more we do that, the more that the government will do it, and over fewer and fewer. You know, I mean, we've already seen that. I mean, they didn't lock us down, which is the surprising thing, I guess, this week, because there was rumours they were going to, and they had this big cabinet meeting.
By the time this comes out, Tom, they could have announced the lockdown, because they're threatening it constantly, aren't they?
Yeah, well, it's just not the way to live, is it? But anyway, yeah, you're right. I mean, these things were always provisional, and it looks like Alison Pearson seems to have either the 5th of January or the 28th of December in her. As sort of, she said, people of various, you know, influential people have said there will be lockdowns. The problem is that you can't live like this. You can't live at the threat of a government lockdown all the time. You can't, you know, the government can't just sit there and threaten it on you know, just in case, which is what they're doing now. It's not even the NHS is going to be overwhelmed. I mean, that was always a lie. It's just in case the NHS is going to be overwhelmed, and we know that. And you know, frankly, we already know that the NHS is overwhelmed every single year. Are we really? And they've had 2 years. I said this 2 weeks ago. I got in trouble on YouTube, but you know, they've had 2 years to sort out the size of the NHS, its capacity for patients, and it's about time that they took responsibility for that.
No, I agree, Tom. As always, I always agree with everything you say, and well, not always. That's an exaggeration, but I think that Nazir Ali is right, and I think this is the message. For me, this is the message I think the church should have been preaching all along, which is that there are basically more important things than COVID, and the salvation of your soul is one of them, and that churches have a mission, and our mission is not to keep people safe primarily, although that is important. It's actually to preach the gospel. I'm pretty sure I've said this before. Like when I go into the co-op and it says, you know, your safety is our number one priority, I feel like saying to the guy, look, on the tannoy, it's not a human being coming up to me and saying that, but I feel like saying, look, your number one priority is to sell me milk. It's not to keep me safe. All right, I'll handle keeping myself safe. All right, when I go outside, I won't like run out into the road and get run over. You focus on my groceries, okay? And it should be the same thing in the church, right? We don't want the church to be an unsafe environment, but it's not, it's not our primary mission to keep people safe. And I think it's a big mistake. The other thing I wanted to say as well is about this. There clearly is a correlation between the amount of times churches have shut and the length, and what's happened to the size of their congregation. It's quite obvious that, I mean, this is just anecdotal, but I think it's quite obviously the case that churches which have stayed open have maintained numbers, and in many cases grown, because other people have lost their churches, and churches which are shutting they either won't grow as fast, they won't grow at all, or they'll decline in number. Many of them have declined catastrophically and fatally. So this is another. It's not to say that like just numbers in themselves are a sign of God's favor, but if you want to reach people as a church, then closing your church is the worst thing that you can possibly do. I mean, I would have thought that'd be obvious, but apparently it's not. It doesn't. You don't hold people with online church. It's because it's not a church, and it doesn't do what a church does. So you've got to open your churches and keep them open. And I think Nazir Ali is right. Christmas is a time when we're supposed to offer hope and happiness and cheer and community to people, and we should not be peddling this government narrative of fear and of loneliness and of shutting ourselves away from the world in the hope that we can avoid disaster. I think everything about that message is wrong, and everything about what Nazir Ali is saying is right. And the other thing about this, I think, as well, Tom, is like there's always a subtext to everything. Like people, I think, like the Welby thing we just listened to. It's like people who present this narrative, they just think that like there's no such thing as a subtext. There's a subtext to everything. Everything needs to be interpreted, right? So if you say close the churches to keep people safe, there's an interpretation of the values that lie behind such a sentiment. In a similar way as if you say, no, we're staying open actually, because we want people to hear the message of the gospel, we want to disciple them, we want community, and so on. There's a subtext to that as well. It's about what you value, it's about what you believe about the ultimate nature of reality, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. Eventually people are going to stop believing that we actually think that, for example, man cannot live by bread alone, but by the word of God, when we allow the churches to shut down and or we shut the churches down deliberately whilst supermarkets and pubs stay open. It's complete madness.
Yeah.
There's literally no reason to go any further ever than the government have asked us to. And sometimes there may even be arguments that we should resist what the government have asked us to. But, to go further, to say, oh, well, the government has said it's exempt to sing in masks, but we're going to, ask you to mask is to pointlessly put ourselves under an authority which is not God.
Yeah. Just to go back to the thing about subtext as well, Nazir Ali, I mean, these are two good articles. I mean, I don't want to give myself too much praise, but these are two good articles to sort of compare and contrast, because Welby's going on about vaccines, right? And at the end of Nazir Ali's one, he talks about the way that Christ lives today in bread and wine, which is, of course, the principal sacrament of the Christian church, at least the one we repeat week by week or day by day. But it sort of highlights to me how significant it is when people close the churches, withhold the sacrament of the Eucharist from Christians, and then tell them that what they need to do instead is be vaccinated on a regular basis. You see, what's happening there is that the vaccine is actually taking the place of the sacrament, and it's acting sacramentally because it's binding you together. It's providing cohesion for this new narrative, this new religious narrative, whereas the old sacrament of the Eucharist is being rejected or sidelined as something which is basically an irrelevance and which we can do without, but we couldn't possibly do without the vaccine, which I think is kind of interesting. Tom, do we want to talk about this exchange between Fraser Nelson and Graham Medley, who's the chair of a COVID modelling for UK Government Scientific Advisory Group, otherwise known as SAGE, for emergencies, I should say, as well.
He's the chairman of the modelling part of it, isn't he? It's really interesting.
Have you got the article up there? Can you read it? Because I've gone over my subscription rate on. I need to get a proper subscription to Spectator. I actually cancelled it because I was so annoyed.
I did that to the Telegraph about a month ago. So,
yeah. Can you?
I can do it. Yeah. So I mean, this is a little bit out of date now. Well, no, it isn't actually. It's only a few days.
I think it's quite relevant.
18th of December. The latest SAGE papers have been published, envisaging anything from 200 to 6,000 deaths a day, depending on how many more restrictions we will get, up to and very much including another lockdown. Earlier today, I had an unexpected chance to ask questions of Graham Medley, the chair of the SAGE Modelling Committee. He is a professor at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, which last week published a study with very gloomy scenarios, making the case for more restrictions. But JP Morgan, the financiers, aren't they? They're sort of financial market sort of people, JP Morgan. Had a close look at the study and spotted something rather big all the way through. The LSHTM, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, assumes that the Omicron variant is just as deadly as Delta. But evidence from South Africa suggests that Omicron infections are milder.
Omicron, please.
JP Morgan pointed out in a note to clients, adjust for it, and the picture changes dramatically. So one assumption tweaked and suddenly no need for lockdown. Why was this not put to the ministers? And so Fraser Nelson grabbed him on Twitter. And there's this fascinating Twitter sort of back and forth, which I'm not going to read out.
No, you should read it. So? Yeah. It's
okay.
Only short. It's only about 8. It's about 7 tweets, isn't it? I've got it here in front of me.
Okay, all right then. So Graham Medley, the point being missed is these are scenarios and not predictions. We can't predict what people are going to do over Christmas. They're made to support a decision to illustrate the possibilities and uncertainty. Fraser Nelson says, "Hi Graham, I guess the question is why LSHTM did not, like JP Morgan, include a scenario of lower virulence, given that this is a very plausible option that changes the outlook massively." And Graham then says, what would be the point of that? Not a snarky question.
What could possibly be the point?
Genuinely to know what you think decision makers would learn from that scenario. Fraser says, in the low virulence scenario modeled by JP Morgan, no further restrictions would be needed, so no harm to economy or society. Can I ask you why you didn't think this less alarming and quite plausible scenario was worth including? Like yours, a genuine question. You know the answer. Do we? Okay, that's what the paper says. If someone draws a line on a graph, it doesn't add any further information. Decision makers are generally only interested in situations where decisions have to be made.
So hang on a sec, can we just stop there? So what he means by that sentence is the only thing that interests the government is outcomes where they have to do something, which is quite interesting, isn't it? So the government don't want to be told do nothing. They want to be told you should do something, which is like that yes minister thing, isn't it? Something must be done. This is something, therefore we should do this. Anyway, so sorry, carry on.
So Fraser then makes the obvious point that if there's nothing needs to be done, then shouldn't that for completion for making the decision up, that scenario be added? And Graham then says, that scenario doesn't inform anything. Decision makers don't have to decide if nothing happens. This is really weird.
They have to decide not to do anything. It's such a stupid thing to say.
So Fraser says, thanks, this helps me understand. So you exclusively model bad outcomes that require restrictions and omit just as likely outcomes that would not require restrictions. To which Graham says, we generally model what we ask to model. There's a dialogue in which policy teams discuss with the modelers what they need to inform their policy.
That's unbelievable, isn't it?
So there's obviously some sort of team, and whether this is in the cabinet or a politician, or whether this is a civil servant who is directing the modelers to only model sort of situations which would need serious things, because they've obviously decided already that they need to do something.
I mean, that is an unbelievable concession, isn't it? So he's saying the government, before they have any models, decide what they want to do. So they decide, for example, they want a lockdown. Well, whether it's the policy team or whoever it is, the decision has already been made, and a policy team then tells the modelers what they need to inform their policy. I mean, that is absolute. That undermines the credibility of any of these models.
It means they're not independent, are they? So they're not giving the government, say, 4 models. Here's what we think is least likely, or best case, worst case, middle case, and most likely case. That would be one way of giving. I mean, even they'd all still just be, as Graham sort of says, lines on a piece of paper. So what do they actually mean? But at least here we might have a sense in which the government could go, so you think that it's going to be between these two things and that this one's most likely. Whereas it looks like they're actually just giving the worst case scenarios because to justify that they're only giving the government scenarios which the government would have to act on.
Yeah. Or another way of putting it is that they only come out with models which support the mainstream narrative about COVID. Because if they were to come out with models which say basically nothing is going to happen and you don't need to do anything, that wouldn't just undermine the need for further lockdowns. It would undermine the mass vaccination program. It would undermine all the other measures like mask wearing and everything like that, and everyone would start to relax and to live normal lives again. And this is the thing, Tom. It's like when you've got the Archbishop of Canterbury kind of laughing and joking about a conspiracy. This is why people believe in conspiracies, because they see things like this and they think, what possible reason could there be for the policy team to tell modelers to model a scenario that informs a policy that they've already come up with. Who benefits? I mean, this is clearly, and this is so immoral. You know, that they are destroying people's lives through these lockdowns. They're reconfiguring the nature of society through what they're doing in a way which is awful. You know, it's awful. It's terrifying. It's ushering in a kind of biosecurity state, changing the nature of the relationship between the individual and the government, doing all sorts of untold harm. And we're being told by this modeler on the SAGE committee that this policy has already been decided in advance of the facts. So it's not necessary.
Yeah. And there's no sort of presumably no demographic kind of democratic kind of control over that. I mean, as Fraser Nelson says, he highly doubts that Sajid Javid is sitting there going, "Oh, only give me the bad ones." Somewhere, he suspects that there is a committee or a group of civil servants who are controlling this to a certain degree. If that's, you know,
is that what he says? Is that what he says in the article?
It says here, from what Professor Medley says, it's unclear that the most likely scenario is even being presented to ministers this time around. So how are they supposed to make good decisions? I highly doubt that Sajid Javid is only asking to churn out models that make the case for lockdown. That instruction, if it is being issued, will have come from somewhere else.
Where is it coming from?
Well, somewhere in the civil servants.
Yeah, well, why would the civil servants be doing that?
I don't know. I'm beginning to sound like a conspiracy theorist or something now, aren't I? You know.
Well, I mean, this is what I'm saying, Tom. It's like, where is this agenda coming from?
I don't know.
It's coming from somewhere, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, this is not imaginary. This is
probably,
on the SAGE modelling team.
It's probably Matt Hancock. Anyway,
tweeting.
Matt Hancock and Gove.
Sending private messages to these guys.
Yeah. So Professor Robert Dingwall, who is a voice of sense through this whole thing, until recently a JCVI expert, he left the committee on vaccinations because he was basically, as far as I can tell, forced out because he was generally against giving vaccines to those who didn't need them.
It was the 12 to 18-year-old age group, I think, that he disapproved of them giving approval for that one. Yeah, sorry, Karen.
Has said that Medley's candor reveals a fundamental problem of scientific ethics in SAGE, i.e. a hardwired negativity bias. He says the unquestioning response to the brief is very like that of SPIB's behavioral scientists, he said, and suggests that COVID inquiry looks into all of this. So, I mean, it's kind of not surprising. I mean, I always suspected something like this must have been happening because, you know, there's one of the issues, of course, is no one, and we've got a bit of a taste of this in the summer when Professor Ferguson predicted 10,000 new cases a day and it peaked at 47,000. And people said, well, hang on, your model was wrong. And he said, well, I'm really glad because, I like being wrong in the right way. It makes me happy when my models are pessimistic, in which case some wit did note that he must be going around in a state of perpetual bliss. But the point is that all of these people there's no downside to them wildly over predicting deaths and cases and ill effects because it would just comes across as prudent, you know. Whereas if they said, don't do anything, then that could come across as being, imprudent. But the problem is that there's a sense in which, obviously no one is modeling in that group. And I think elsewhere he says there's something about him saying that he assumes that there are other committees modelling ill effects of lockdowns, but no one is. So no one's sitting there going, okay, well, we've got this many deaths predicted by SPI by SAGE, but the lockdown's going to do this in the long run. No one's doing that. There's no balance. We've suspected that for a while as well. But it's nice that it's all come out.
That's true. I mean, the thing about Dingwall that I don't know if he really addresses is this thing about policy teams who have a pre-existing policy that then they tell the modelers about it, and then the modelers have to come up with something. His comments aren't directly pertinent to that, as far as I could tell from what you just read out. Which, I mean, I think that for me, that's the most significant thing about this, is that he's basically saying that the policy has already been decided and that the modelers have to come out with the policy. And that's Fraser Nelson then asked after that, I've got it up here, okay, so you were asked to model bad Omicron outcomes and make no comment as to the probability. So that, and I don't see that he may have replied, but it's not obvious that he's replied. But that seems to be the most shocking thing about this is that these modelers are responding to a political agenda. Unless I'm missing something, that is very, very weird. And this is the thing, is like people just keep on like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're like going on about stuff for which there's no evidence. But this is a guy in Sage actually saying this, so it's not a conspiracy theory. He says there's a dialogue in which policy teams discuss with the modelers what they need to inform their policy. Now, that sounds like, all right, you don't want to say a conspiracy maybe, but that's a dialogue, isn't it, where a political agenda is being discussed and enacted. So I mean, I just think that is crazy. I mean, I don't understand how anyone can argue against this. I mean, what even is the argument? Like the policy makers know better than the Sage modelers or something. I don't know. Should we move on? Let's I
think we should. We need to bring this to a close soon, don't we? So I think we should do a question the Rev.
Well, I was just going to say also, Tom, that the WHO very surprisingly has recommended that members of the public across the world abandon their Christmas plans.
Yeah, that's nice of them, isn't it?
Following the concerns that the Omicron variant is spreading significantly faster than the previous.
Omicron.
Yes. And Dr. Tedros, so the WHO's Director General, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, I mean, that's even harder to pronounce than Omicron, said that an event cancelled is better than a life cancelled. But I guess
I mean, it's just the same old, isn't it? I mean, you could say that, but how long are we going to do this for?
He goes on to say, all of us sick of this pandemic. All of us want to spend time with friends and family. All of us want to get back to normal. The fastest way to do this, are you ready for this, Tom? The fastest way is for all of us, leaders and individuals, to make the difficult decisions that must be made to protect ourselves and others. In some cases, that may mean cancelling or delaying events. It's better to cancel now and celebrate later than to celebrate now and grieve later. I mean, is anyone still taking this seriously, do you think?
Well, who knows? I really don't know. I don't think anyone in the public is, or at least the public is gradually turning, aren't they? Turning against lockdown, turning against restrictions. Sounds like the cabinet are gradually turning against it as well, which is good, because the Quad didn't manage to force a lockdown through before Christmas this year. And the Quad being, as it is, Gove, Javid, Savid, isn't it? Who are the others? Johnson's purported to be not in favour of the current lockdown, but who knows?
There isn't a lockdown at the moment.
Well, currently locking down. He doesn't. It sounds like he's.
I don't know what's going on with him. It's like he's possessed, to be honest with you. But the point being, Tom, I think, is that to keep on telling people that the fastest way to get back to their normal lives is to live in this completely bizarre and dehumanizing way for years and years and years is a somewhat paradoxical message.
It's madness, isn't it? It's complete madness. How long can we do this for?
The fastest way to return to normal is to lock yourself away for months and months and months, if not years, and be told the same thing over and over again. Like last Christmas, we were told this message, weren't we, by Boris? We've got to cancel this Christmas so that we can have next Christmas. And you get to next Christmas, you've got the WHO saying, oh, you should probably not have your Christmas this year because otherwise you'll die. And so better wait until next Christmas.
Yeah, next Christmas.
What guarantee is there that this is going to be any different next Christmas?
There isn't. We said this a long time ago.
Like, I know we have.
If we continue down this route, and hopefully we won't, then who would bet against being in some sort of restriction every single winter?
Christmas is the worst time of year for it as well, because it's the coldest time. It's the coldest, darkest time of year where loads of people die.
It's when you want to come together, isn't it? It's when you need to gather around a warm fire.
Exactly, or a radiator. Tom, yeah, let's do a question the Rev. Now, this is quite a negative question I've chosen for this week. So Deepak Skaker, who's got a picture of the old man from Up for his. Do
you know, there's a chap in Bradford-on-Avon who looks exactly like him, like literally.
Yeah, he also looks like Terry Virgo, who's the leader of the New Frontiers movement. It's actually quite uncanny. Yeah. So the question is, why is the modern church so reluctant to talk about sin? What do you think, Tom? What's your?
Well, so there's a sort of there's category issues going on. What is the modern church? Which modern church? I've talked about sin in my church. I'm not especially reluctant to. I guess he's meaning why is our leadership, and indeed we once again got Welby not really saying anything about sin. It's quite funny.
Well, the sin for him is about not taking the vaccine, isn't it?
Well, no, he actually didn't say that. He said, "Oh, he's going to sit on the hedge about that one." I mean, it's obviously what he thinks, but he never says it. It's a bit like it took him. He never said anything about. He's incredibly slippery. He doesn't really want to talk about anything, I think, Welby, other than the wonderful vaccine.
And the climate.
And the climate, yeah.
And not
so I think that it's quite hard to tell people that they're sinners, because the modern sort of world has really, we talked about this a bit on the Rev before, really redefined what freedom is. And freedom is to do what you want. That's the 21st century mantra, isn't it? You have the freedom to self-define, to self, everything, to be you, and being you is not a matter of anything other than following your own desires. That is what people are told. It's a bit like the girl guides change their promise from promise to trust and love God to to be true to myself as the sort of fundamental standard by which all humanity should be held. And that selfness is not just it's everything. So sin is so often about not being true to ourselves. Actually, it's about denying ourselves or avoiding sin rather, because we are, since the fall, sinful people. We've fallen away from the template that God given to us. But it's very hard to tell someone that their life is a sin or sinful, because they get quite upset about it. So there's a sort of even in churches that are Orthodox, there's a hesitancy about this, I think, because you don't want to upset people, and that is almost a greater sin for the church. I think that's part of it, though. I think that's part of it. It's very hard to talk about sin because people have been brought up in the last 30 years to believe that effectively sinful lifestyles are in fact a validation of the self, not something to be avoided and to step away from. Jamie?
I think those are all good answers, really. I was just trying to think about what's actually changed. I mean, I think what you say about freedom is true, that freedom is sort of promoted as the highest good, isn't it? And at least it used to be. It's not anymore.
Freedom is a high good, but freedom is in Christianity, and we said this before, freedom isn't, and I think Archdeacon Dowler, Edward, wrote to us about this a few months ago, how sort of libertarianism sort of looks a little bit like, which is kind of a libertarian's pursuit of the freedom of the self, looks a little bit like virtue, but actually lacks a virtuous core. Freedom isn't the freedom to do what you like. Freedom is the freedom to avoid sin. To do what God likes.
Well, yeah. I mean, the way I'd put it is to say that freedom in a Christian conception is the freedom to become what you're created to be. Yeah. So it's the difference between like just being able to bang on the piano keys and being able to be a great pianist. You have to work in order to be free in that sense. You have to work to be free to be a great musician. You have to work towards a certain end to be free to be the kind of human being that you were created to be, which is a kind of central idea in so-called virtue ethics, which I think is a deeply Christian idea. But the modern idea is like freedom is a lack of restraint. So that's what freedom is. That's a really high good. And then therefore, if you say to people, well, this or that is sinful and you shouldn't do it, that's sort of mitigating against that very deeply held value that people have. There's also the issue of tolerance, which is also a sort of, it's related to that notion of freedom, isn't it? But that's also, and it's held to be a kind of like top value in the world. So if you say, well, this or that lifestyle is sinful, it's held to be intolerant or even hateful. So I think the church has a real problem thinking about sin and finding ways of articulating it and even believing in it. One thing I would say about it is that I was doing a catechetical session for our church recently, and it just occurred to me how the doctrine of original sin makes such perfect sense of what human beings are, because we are created in God's image. We are great. We are wonderful. If we're fearfully and wonderfully made, as it says in Psalm 139, we're clearly superior to the animals in terms of our intellect, in terms of our capacity for relationship and development as a species, our spiritual dimension, and so on and so forth. But there is something wrong with us. And anyone who is, married or lived with somebody else or even had a relationship with somebody else knows that there are things like, working parts in our souls which aren't quite right. And it causes us to do bad things, to say bad things, to be selfish, to fall below the moral standard that we all know exists. And to me, this makes perfect sense. The Christian answer makes perfect sense. So I do think we've got a problem talking about this, but it's probably because we think about it maybe in too sort of sharp and legalistic a sense, and maybe we need to try and do a bit more sort of deep theological reflection and think about ways that we can sort of speak about sin, which people are going to be able to connect with and which they find persuasive. I think it is fair to say that you do have to think about how to reach the culture. I think if you want to be effective in terms of evangelism, it's probably not going to be that effective to just go out in the street and start sort of like pointing at people and saying, you're a sinner for this and that reason. You have to try and connect with people and help them to understand it. But it's easier not to, isn't it, Tom? I guess that's the simple reason is we don't offend people and John.
Well, I think certainly part of the liberal church has trouble with a kind of with an idea of what sin might be. It's very hard to define sin when you can do just about anything, and this idea that sort of that the Bible's effectively wrong about various bits and bobs, which they have to hold.
Well, don't you think there's something like paradoxical about our culture that this conversation reveals, which is that like we all talk about like tolerance and freedom, but at the same time there is an increasing sense of the sort of communitarian bond which obliges us to do things, right? And if you don't do them, you're like, for this vaccination thing I keep coming back to, but it's like, well, if you don't do this, you're selfish. But hang on a second, I thought you said that I was free, and I thought you said that you were tolerant. So in what sense is this tolerant, and in what sense is this promotion of liberty or freedom? Do you see what I mean? I think
absolutely.
People still have a sense that people can be selfish and that it's wrong to be selfish. It's wrong to be self-centered or egotistical, at least to a very great extent. I'm sure there's a funny thing about this whole COVID thing is you don't get many people coming out and saying, actually, I don't care if anyone dies or if everyone dies of COVID, I'm not a risk. And so I'm going to do what I like. Nobody says that, but I'm pretty sure probably lots of people think it. But in some ways that would be a more consistent position, because the only reason I would venture that we think in this kind of this way, that we have a duty to love and care for people, and that we have to safeguard the lives of other human beings, is because of our Christian heritage. I think shorn of that, it doesn't make any sense. Why would you spend your whole life locked in your house to protect other people if there's no sort of ultimate value or dignity in the lives of other people, and and your life is the only thing that matters? Sorry, Tom, carry on.
No, I mean, certainly in the pagan world, there was no consideration that life had any inherent value. That's why they, left babies to die, or,
they're exposed,
treated each other as slaves, and mass massacres happened all the time, and there's nothing, even, there's not even a sense in which there's inherent value in everyone.
Yeah. Should we do our Christmas song?
We should. We need to wrap up because I'm freezing, Jamie. I'm absolutely freezing.
Okay. Well, can we do the Christmas song and then
it'll bring cheer and warmth into my heart?
Okay.
Yes.
So what we'll do is I think they're mostly sort of roughly 8/8. So we'll do what we did last time. Okay. Now, can you remind me what's the tune to "On Jordan's Bank"? Can you remember that?
On Jordan's bank, the Baptist, Winchester New. Da, 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 da,
on Jordan's bank, the Baptist cry. Yeah, I got that. All right. So I'll start. Ready? Are you ready?
Yeah, are we going to choose our own tunes?
You do what you like in terms of.
Do you know? I might just get a hymn book so I get a bit of variety into it. Otherwise, I get stuck. One moment.
Oh, you're gonna turn this into some kind of
farce. Yeah, obviously.
All right, come on, hurry up then. People are waiting. Our viewers are waiting, and our listeners as well. Just so everyone knows, Tom is now proceeding to the back of the room, grabbing some kind of blue hymn book, and sitting back in his chair, All right, Tom, are you ready to start?
Almost. I need to get me.
Come on, look it up. You
honestly,
I'm saying you need to go because you're cold. Why don't you turn your central heating on?
I haven't. I don't really know. I'm not allowed.
Your story is inconsistent. That's the Sage Modelling Committee.
I haven't. I tried a little heater just down here. It was going on forever and ever. I say forever. I've had it on for most of the thing, but I've only just realised that it doesn't actually produce any heat. It just produces a sort of draft. So my ankles are even colder than when I started out.
That sounds very disappointing. I must say about this, the thing I like about this Christmassy poem, and I've actually not noted down the name of the author, but I like some of the lines. Some of the lines are they're very funny kind of rhymes, and they absolutely fall foul of the thing I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. I'm gonna start. So Christmas time again has come. A time for love and family fun, a time of hope and reflection of what's to come, what's been and done.
But this Christmas brings uncertainty in how we live, who can be free, where we can go, who we can see, who lives in joy or misery.
I'm going to try a different tune. These political bureaucrats, they tell you this and tell you that. They make you think that they know best when really they know so much less. That works. Go on.
That does work. I had one in my head. How does
canon?
Oh yeah. These political bureaucrats.
No, we just did that. We just did that.
No, we don't know. Sorry.
You
yourself know all of this. You know your health. You know the risk. And most of all, you know the stats are minuscule, and that's a fact.
It's fine to think that you're okay. It doesn't affect me anyway. But what happens when that day comes? Will there be anywhere left to run? I don't really know what this means now. It's not very Christmassy. It's more like the final judgment.
Very Adventy then.
Yeah,
what have we got to now?
And two.
Oh, blimey. Give me a tune. Is it all just...
I think I've used all the ones I know.
You can't have done.
Come on, you've got a hymn book in front of you.
Yeah, I know. I just trying to work out what I can't. There aren't that many 8888888.
Long meter.
Is it? Oh, long meter. That's what I'm looking for.
I think it is. Yeah, I
should have known that.
You're meant to be a musician.
I know, a musician and everything. Long meter. Okay. Where have we got to? Here we go.
And two.
Oh, no one knows that tune.
It doesn't matter whether people know the tune. Flipping out.
Oh, I know. Here we are.
Come on.
I don't even know that tune myself. Okay, where are we? And who?
And
we're just going to go back to Tanis's Cameron, I think. And who will come to your defense when they say you can't? Will you contest? Will you tell your kids you tried your best, or will you wait in compulsoriness? I'm not sure that's a word.
Will people say now that's enough? 3 shots or 4? That seems a bit rough. For a virus, we know that most survive. Please think twice, it just may save your life. Right, one more, come on.
Okay. Do you know what? What's it called?
Just choose anything.
Yeah, I know. Do you know the good tune is St. Anne's Fugue? What's that? But I've forgotten it. It was in my head before we started. Then you kept singing tunes at me. It's all.
No, we
should plan this. I'm really awful. I've got loads of stuff in my head, but I've got too much stuff in my head. I keep jumping between them. But let's go with. Jamie, go on. You choose one. We'll do it together.
Yet I look to light in times of darkness.
104. No, it's not even the same meter. It's nowhere near the right meter.
Well, it's because this meter keeps changing. We can't do it at the same time because of the delay. Right, I'm doing
it. Yet I look to light in times of darkness. I find joy in tiny things regardless. And I hope that we all may soon shall see that this is not a free society.
Oh, that's good.
But most of all, I pray that we can respect each other wholeheartedly and remember why we all are here, to be of good cheer and not to live in fear.
Honestly, so we like that. That was a good look. It's a good poem, but it doesn't scan and it changes significantly towards the end, right? So it's confusing. You've confused Tom. What was the name of that? That's often.
Oh God, I help in ages part. St. Anne's.
No, no. It often goes to I heard the voice of Jesus say.
That was.
It's not St. Anne's fugue. It's something.
No. St. Anne's is. I was going to say one thing that does fit is. Da, 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 da. Oh God, our help in ages. Oh, it's all gone out of my head now.
You just.
It's all gone out of my head.
The one that often goes to. I heard the voice of Jesus say, which
yes,
Kingsfold.
Well, that's Kingsfold. Yes,
yeah, Kingsfold. That would, yeah. So I think Kingsfold is. I don't know.
Double common.
I think yeah.
Kingsfold is double common meter.
Look, if anyone is still listening to this,
no one is.
Sorry. Okay, we apologise for this absolute farce. But look, we want to say this last episode before Christmas, right? So we want to say we do hope everyone has a really happy Christmas.
Yeah.
Don't be overcome with fear.
No.
But engage in Christmas cheer. All right.
That's good. That is a rhyme.
That actually rhymes. Yeah.
That's a rhyme.
Use your. I have done rapping before. Use your Santa costumes and your crackers and your Christmas dinners. I started this sentence all wrongly. Just have a great time. Basically, have a good Christmas, and we'll be back. I don't know what we're going to do over this time. We haven't talked about it. We never plan these things, so. We'll try and do some stuff at some point.
Probably won't have anything next week, I should think, because I'm busy.
You're probably a bit too busy.
I'm a bit too busy. Well, yeah, I'm away. I'll go see. Assuming that we're not all sort of, thrown into.
Well, we might have to do something if we're all plunged into a lockdown, because people will be like, "Oh, we need our fix of irreverent." This is the thing: is like when it's all going badly in society, people come to us for commentary. So anyway, but we're not promising it. We're not promising anything, all right? So. Don't say that we promise something that we can't deliver, and we're not going to, but we might. You never know. Right? Do you want to
I've got the tune. It's gone into my head now.
Go on then. Go.
It might have gone though.
Go to the first verse.
No, it's all right. It's gone.
Oh, it's just unbelievable.
Honestly.
All right. Okay. End the podcast. Right. Do you want to do? People want prayers, Tom. Come on.
Yeah, of course they do. Heavenly Father, thank you for the time of joy and laughter. Thank you for music. Thank you for all our listeners. May they be blessed. We pray that truth and love will prevail this Christmas and forever. Amen.
Amen. So thanks, everyone. Do rate, review, share the podcast, email us if you like, join our Patreon, join our Telegram. Oh, my Substack blog, I didn't mention that. jamiefranklin.substack.com for it's good things. So it's all positive, good things about life, and you might like reading it. So jamiefranklin.substack.com.
Also, Jamie wrote a book. I don't know if anyone heard. See if you have a last minute Christmas present in hand. I'm not sure what to buy, Grandma.
If you've got £100, you can buy my book, Charles Taylor and Anglican Theology.
Perfect Christmas present.
Aesthetic ecclesiology.
It's just that it's just what everyone needs in their stocking. It's
published by Palgrave Macmillan. It's a real book. It really exists. It's a reputable publisher, and you might find it interesting. I tell you what, Tom. Someone on Twitter actually tweeted and said they bought it. So that's the first person I'm aware of who's actually bought it. So I was quite delighted. I was quite delighted at that.
Very good. Yeah.
In all seriousness, if people do buy it, then it's more likely they'll publish it as a paperback, and then it will be affordable for people. So if you're affiliated with like a library, like a university library with the theology department, then put in a request for it, and your librarian will have a budget, and they can buy it. So please do.
Yeah.
Please do go for that. And if I've got 4 copies left. I've given one to each of my parents, but maybe at some point we'll do a competition, and I'll give one of them away. But I'm not ready to part with them yet.
No,
so
of course not.
All right, but thanks so much everyone for listening, and God bless, and we'll be with you again who knows when, but have a happy Christmas. Happy Christmas, Tom.
You too, Jamie. God bless you.
God bless.